Everyone in Loomis County knew the story of what happened on the railroad tracks just outside of the city. Years ago, a bus full of children was on its way home from a field trip when the engine gave out on the tracks. Nobody made it off the bus in time, and everyone was killed. Some say you can hear the voices or laughter of the children if you're walking through the area at night. Not that there's much of a reason to be on foot so far out of town. Jimmy and Nancy were headed home from a party, still buzzing from the friends and loud music. As their vehicle neared the train tracks, there was a sudden loud from the engine, and the car began filling with smoke. Jimmy gripped the steering wheel, trying his hardest to bring the jolting and sputtering car to a safe stop. With one final exhausted cough, the engine gave out, and they came to a standstill.
Nancy, roll your window down. The smoke.
They opened their windows, and the air in the cabin began to clear. This revealed their resting place. The car had stopped directly on the tracks.
Jimmy, what happened? Is everything all right?
The damn thing won't start.
He revved the gas, but the car only groaned, and then the crossing lights began flashing, and the barriers lowered towards the ground. Far in the distance, a glimmer of light broke through the darkness. A train was headed directly towards them.
Train! Jimmy, there's a train!
I see it, okay?
Jimmy removed the keys and tried starting the engine again, but nothing happened.
Please, hurry, Jimmy! The train is coming!
Screw it, let's go.
Jimmy unbuckled himself and reached for the door. In the passenger seat, Nancy found herself trapped by an unrelenting seatbelt.
I can't get it off!
The buckle had been sticking lately, but Jimmy was usually able to free it with a few minutes of pulling and twisting, time they didn't have now. He dove towards the buckle, pulling at the fabric with all his strength.
It's getting tighter! It hurts!
Can you pull yourself out? Leave it buckled, but slide out the bottom.
It's too tight, Jimmy! Please, I don't want to die!
I'm trying!
Fucking cut it!
With what?
Deep rumble began to shake the entire car as the train approached, yet Nancy's seatbelt wouldn't budge. Her fingers left bloody smears across the belt as she hopelessly pulled and prodded.
Oh my god, Jimmy!
The train's horn blew and blew again, and finally they heard the piercing whistle of the brakes. Jimmy was trying to pry the buckle apart with the car key, but to no avail.
It's stopping. Will it stop?
It's not gonna stop in time, Nance.
As the train barreled towards them, the couple met each other's swelling eyes.
Jimmy, you have to go.
I'm not leaving you.
Get out of here!
No! Not without you. I won't leave you here.
There was nothing more to say. He pulled himself close to her and held tight. Knowing they were doomed, Jimmy and Nancy braced for certain death. But then, the car suddenly lurched forward. They gasped as a second and third thrust cleared them from the tracks with just seconds to spare. The train engine passed behind them with a roar, eventually screeching to a stop several hundred yards away.
How did you do that?
I didn't do anything.
Still shaking, Jimmy opened his car door and stepped onto the gravel road. He didn't know how to properly thank whoever had saved their lives. But as he looked around in the bright moonlight, he couldn't see anyone at all.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Finally, Nancy's seatbelt freed itself, and she fell from the open car door almost instantly. She went to Jimmy, embracing him and wiping the sweaty bangs from her eyes.
There's nobody here.
They looked ahead at the train cars, now silent and still.
Are they on the other side?
There's no way they could have...
Maybe they're just shy.
Nancy called into the night.
Thank you! Thank you for saving our lives.
Their only answer was the wind. Jimmy kissed Nancy's forehead and pulled her even closer.
I'm so glad we're okay.
Me too.
They stood there a while, her arms tucked around him on the inside of his jacket. The train conductor yelled something, but he was too far to comprehend. At some point, the engine started up again and the rail cars began to move. It was time for the young couple to get on their way too. Jimmy and Nancy turned back towards the car, unsure of what they'd do now. After such a close call with death, there were worse-sounding things than a long walk back to the city. Maybe someone would pick them up along the way.
Jimmy, do you see that?
Her eyes were on the back of the car. Along the bumper, there were dozens of small handprints lingering in the dust from the road.
Do you think?
She couldn't bring herself to say it out loud, and neither could he.
Yeah, I do.
Shaking, Jimmy turned back around towards the crossing. Had the tracks always shimmered like that in the moonlight?
Thank you.
Nancy and Jimmy knew it was the ghosts of the children who worked together to make sure their tragedy wouldn't be repeated. They grabbed their essentials from the car and began walking towards the slight glow of the city, hand in hand. As they walked, Nancy recalled something about the events years ago that she'd long forgotten. Witnesses reported that the school bus driver opened the door and nearly stepped off the bus before the collision. They said he could have lived, but he stayed with the children. He wouldn't leave them behind. The next day, Jimmy returned with a tow truck, eager to share the handprints with another viewer. But by the time they arrived, they had long faded back into the dust.
Timothy was deeply asleep when his buddy shook him awake, standing over him in the bottom bunk. He looked at his watch. It was shortly after 3 a.m. But at scout camp, you couldn't go anywhere without a buddy. If Timothy's buddy had to go to the bathroom, they both went together. He climbed out of bed and pulled his boots over his pajama bottoms. Grabbing his lantern, he followed his buddy out of the cabin and into the cold, rainy night. They didn't talk. It was only the end of the first week, and they didn't know much about each other. They both seemed to want to get back to bed as soon as possible. Timothy waited under the awning, shivering, for several minutes. He kicked open the door and yelled inside, but his buddy didn't answer. Finally, he had enough, and he walked in, plugging his nose. The bathroom was dark, but Timothy's dim lantern showed that the stall door at the very end was closed. He yelled out, but once again, nothing. Timothy walked slowly to the end of the bathroom, jumping with a clash of thunder, and knocked on the stall door. He called his buddy's name, but there was no response. Timothy pushed on the door, but it was locked. Frustrated, he began to get down on his knees to look under the door, when finally he heard his buddy's voice.
Almost done,
he said quietly. Timothy fetched his lantern and walked back to the bathroom door, opening it up to breathe in the damp air from outside. He asked his buddy to hurry up and stepped back into the night. But several more minutes passed, and he still didn't come outside. Having enough, Timothy walked back in straight to the end of the room and pounded hard on the door. He yelled for the kid to hurry up. How much sleep was he supposed to lose for this? The buddy was silent. Probably embarrassed, Timothy thought. Or maybe he fell asleep on the toilet. He warned him that he was going to look under the door if he didn't get a response, and hearing nothing, he did. First, just bending over, but he only saw the foot of the toilet bowl. No legs or shoes. So he pulled his head underneath the door, stretching to look up, to find the stall totally empty. He climbed to his feet, turning around to unlatch the door, but it wasn't even locked. It had to be a prank, he thought, so he left the stall, forcing open the doors on the rest of the toilets. But the entire bathroom was empty, and there wasn't any way out except the door that Timothy stood right by the entire time. He pinched himself, but it wasn't a dream. "This is stupid. I'm going back," he said. "Screw the buddy system." With a flicker, his lantern went out, and he stood there, frozen in the darkness, when from the last stall at the end he heard,
"I'm not your buddy."
flashed, and Timothy swore he saw the shape of a person. He sprinted from the bathroom, slipping and soaking himself with mud, and making it back to the cabin, he made no effort not to wake the others. He pulled the chain, and the light bulb hanging from the ceiling came to life. The only empty bed was his own. The others were a mix of confused and annoyed, and a few continued sleeping. Timothy decided he didn't want to talk about it, so he took off his wet clothes, climbed into bed, and stared at the ceiling until it was time for breakfast. He asked his buddy about it as soon as he could in the morning, but the boy insisted he never woke him up the night before. A counselor who overheard the conversation pulled Timothy aside and asked him to share his experience. As he did, the counselor went pale. He whispered in response that the same thing had happened to him the year before, when he'd gone to the bathroom alone, as counselors were allowed to do. And then he stopped himself, seeming to choke. But Timothy could tell there was something he wasn't saying. He prodded, and at first his elder wouldn't budge, but finally he relented, though he asked Timothy not to tell the others for fear of scaring them. It was opening week, 10 years ago, when a camper killed himself in the very last stall.
It was the evening of the high school dance, and Catherine was wearing the dress she'd worked on all year. She didn't have the money to buy something new like the other girls in school, but her talented hands created something much better, something one of a kind. The red, sparkling fabric was stunning against her skin, and she knew her crush, Matthew, would simply have to take notice. But after she'd blushed her cheeks and straightened her hair, she was greeted by her mother in the kitchen, wearing a heavy scowl. "You're not going to the dance," she said. "Dancing is for the devil's children, and you dress in the color of sin. Go upstairs at once, change your clothes and wipe your face. Then come down and make us something to eat." Her mother returned to the front of the house, where she was likely reading or sewing, and Catherine stomped up the stairs to her room. She'd told her mother all about the dance, even showing her a glimpse of the fabric the day she brought it home. But sometimes it was like she had two different mothers entirely, and tonight she had the mean one. She dampened a cloth and raised it to her cheek, but paused. It wasn't fair. She'd waited years for this dance and spent hours on her dress. And who knows who Matthew would dance with if she wasn't there? For the first time in her life, she decided to defy her mother. She gathered her things, walked down the stairs and out of the house without saying a word. With a burst of adrenaline, Catherine sprinted towards the school gym. The dance had already started, and she wanted to enjoy every moment possible. She could hear the music from outside as she neared the doors and finally entered the building. In a fantastic moment, it felt like every single person in the room stopped and looked at her standing there in her shimmering dress. She was so used to going unseen. She looked through the crowd for Matthew, but couldn't find him. Her girlfriends were all on the dance floor with their dates, so Catherine stood near the punch bowl as she continued looking around the room for her crush. A few other boys came up to her and asked her to dance, and she bathed in the euphoria of turning them down. After all, she was waiting for someone. Finally, she spotted Matthew with a group of his friends, and their eyes locked. Her breath caught in her throat. But this was the moment she had been waiting for. His eyes remained on her as she made her way in his direction. She could tell he was shocked by the beauty of her dress. But when she asked him to dance, he turned the color of the fabric. The others around him laughed, teasing him for being asked to dance by a girl. Catherine stepped to the shadows of the gym, suddenly regretting the choices that led here. She'd never admit it, but she'd made the dress for him. Now it was for nothing, and she couldn't bear to think of what punishment awaited at home. From the darkness of the crowd, a gorgeous young man appeared next to her. She'd never seen him before. He had shiny jet black hair, a perfectly tailored suit, and piercing eyes that captivated. And he turned to Catherine and asked her to dance. She couldn't even manage to say yes. She only held out her hand for the taking. He led her to the dance floor, and the music suddenly erupted in volume. They danced together, and she moved with an ease she didn't recognize. She'd always loved to dance, but never had much talent for it. She followed the beautiful man's lead, very aware of the hundreds of eyes on them. The man spun her around and around. The others in the gym clapped and cheered, and he spun her faster. She began to lose her breath and tried to step out of the spin, but he spun her even faster. The floor seemed to melt beneath her feet. She tried to focus on her own limbs but couldn't. It was as if they moved on their own accord, and her feet grew hotter and hotter. And yet he spun her faster. The crowd cheered and whooped and applauded, and finally she was spinning so fast that a cloud of dust formed around them so thick that they could no longer be seen by the crowd. The music returned to its normal level, and the dust fell to the floor, revealing the beautiful man standing there. But Catherine nowhere to be seen. He took a bow for the crowd, and, fully enamored, they applauded with vigor. And then he disappeared too. The devil had come for one of his children and spun her all the way to hell.
Mr. Rivers was known for his temper and for taking it out on his students. No one dared misbehave in his classroom after rumors spread of his horrible punishments from back in the day. He once forced a boy to hold his nose in the corner of the room for so long, he fainted and cracked his head open. None of the other students dared say anything. Another kid had to stay after class and rewrite sentences thousands of times. Mr. Rivers went home for the night, but the boy was too scared to move without completing the task, and he stayed in the desk for 2 days straight. He didn't speak to anyone else again and left the school at the end of the year. But the worst tale was a young girl who snuck out of class one afternoon, enraging Mr. Rivers. And the following day, he locked her in a closet. Her friends stayed after school to set her free, but he guided them out of the building and left with the keys, and the building was empty for the whole weekend. No one saw or heard from her ever again. Mr. Rivers didn't see any point in respecting his inferiors, and he refused to learn his students' names. Instead, they were each assigned a number on the first day, which is how he'd referred to them for the rest of the semester. Because of the ever-growing school enrollment, his class was almost completely full, with 30 total students. One evening, after an especially infuriating day, he sat at his desk grading papers, most of them failing. An attendant from the office came by with a note, saying they'd received a message for him. It read,
"Your cruelty is self-serving. Try teaching with kindness. Number 31. I have no student 31.
He sat there, staring at the note. He knew there was no student 31, and the thought that someone in his class was pranking him only infuriated him more. The following day, he reprimanded each of his classes, threatening all kinds of punishments if the student behind the prank didn't come forward. Nothing did any good, and nobody had anything to say.
Then the only fair thing to do,
He said,
is give everyone detention.
and he spent the evening supervising all of his students working in silence until the building closed. The students had gone back to their dorms, and he was preparing to leave. As he put on his jacket, he noticed a paper on his desk he hadn't seen before. It read,
It's not too late for you. Number 31.
He looked around the empty room and tore into the hallway, desperate to catch whoever left the note, and spent the following day making even more severe threats than before. Getting nowhere, he dismissed his classes and worked in a state of rage throughout the day in the quiet classroom. Several hours passed as he graded the same few papers, unable to focus, and he rubbed his sore eyes in frustration. It was time to call it a night. But when he stood up, he nearly screamed. He'd been alone for hours in that room, but now, behind him on the blackboard was a sprawling message written in chalk.
Don't turn your back on me.
He stumbled from the room, disoriented and choking on the air, and fled from the building. The next day, the students learned he'd be taking a week of medical leave, which turned into 2 weeks, and then a month, and finally, permanent retirement. No one at the school ever saw Mr. Rivers again. The following summer, the gutted classroom was being remodeled, and the wall that held the blackboard was torn down. Stuffed inside, construction workers found the long, mummified body of a young girl.
The children were always called Blue Eyes and Turkey. The elder was most like her dear father, who was far away at sea, and the mother would often say,
"Child, you've taken your father's eyes."
For the father had the bluest of blue eyes. When the younger one was still a baby, her loud, rapid gurgling brought to mind the gobble of a beloved turkey that lived near the village. Along with a new baby, the mother and Blue Eyes and Turkey all lived together in a lonely cottage at the edge of the forest. The forest was so near that the garden at the back seemed to be part of it, and the tall fir trees were so close that their big black arms stretched over the little thatched roof, and when the moon shone upon them, their tangled shadows were all over the whitewashed walls. It was a long way to the village, nearly 1.5 miles, and the mother had to work very hard and had no time to go herself to see if there was a letter at the post office from the dear father. The 2 children were very proud of being able to go alone, and when they came back tired from the long walk, there would be the mother waiting and watching for them, and the tea would be ready and the baby crowing with delight, and if by any chance there was a letter from the sea, then they were very happy indeed. The cottage room was so cozy. The walls were as white as snow, and against them hung cake tins and baking dishes, the lid of a large saucepan, and the fish slice, polished and shining bright as ever. On one side of the fireplace, above the bellows, hung the clock that always struck the wrong hour and was always running down too soon. But it was a good clock, with a little picture on its face. The baby's high chair stood in one corner, and in another there was a cupboard hung up high, in which the mother kept all manner of little surprises.
"Dear children,"
the mother said one afternoon late in the autumn,
"it is very chilly for you to go to the village. Don't be long now. Go the nearest way, and don't look at any strangers you meet, and be sure you do not talk with them."
She kissed them and called them dear good children, and they joyfully started on their way. The village was gayer than usual, for there had been a fair the day before, and the people who had made merry still hung about the streets as if reluctant to own that their holiday was over.
I wish we'd have come yesterday. Then we might have seen something. Look there.
Turkey pointed to a stall covered with gingerbread, but the children had no money. At the end of the street, close to where the coaches stopped, an old man sat on the ground with his back resting against the wall of a house, and by him were 2 dogs. Evidently they were dancing dogs, the children thought, and longed to see them perform, but they seemed as tired as their master, and sat quite still beside him, looking as if they had not even a single wag left in their tails.
Oh, I do wish we'd been here yesterday,
Blue Eyes said again as they went on to the grocer's, which was also the post office. The postmistress was very busy weighing out half-pounds of coffee, and when she had time to attend to the children, she only said that she had nothing for them and went on with what she was doing. Blue Eyes and Turkey turned away to return home, back slowly down the village street, past the man with the dogs again. One dog now sat up rather crookedly, looking very melancholy and rather ridiculous. They had walked some way, and just before they reached the bridge, they noticed, Resting against a pile of stones, a strange, dark figure. At first, they thought it was someone asleep. Then they thought it was a poor old woman, ill and hungry. And then they saw that it was a strange, wild-looking girl who seemed very unhappy, and they felt sure that something was the matter. So they thought they would ask her to see if there was anything they could do to help her. The girl seemed to be tall and about 15 years old. She was dressed in very ragged clothes. Around her shoulders there was an old brown shawl, which was torn at the corner that hung down the middle of her back. She wore no bonnet, and an old yellow handkerchief which she had tied around her head had fallen backwards and was all huddled up around her neck. Her hair was coal black and hung down, uncombed and unfastened, just anyhow. It was not very long, but it was very shiny, and it seemed to match her bright black eyes and her dark freckled skin. On her feet were coarse gray stockings and thick, shabby boots, which she had evidently forgotten to lace up. She had something hidden away under her shawl, but the children did not know what it was. She did not move or stir till they were within a yard of her. Then she wiped her eyes as if she had been crying bitterly and looked up. The children stood in front of her for a moment, wondering what they ought to do.
"Are you crying?"
Turkey asked shyly. To their surprise, she said in an almost cheerful voice,
"Oh dear, no. Not at all. Quite the contrary. Are you?"
They felt half a mind to walk away, for anyone could see that they were not crying.
Perhaps you are lost?
"Certainly not. How could I be lost when you have just found me? Besides, I live nearby."
The children were surprised at this, for they had never seen her before, and yet they thought they knew all the village folk by sight.
"What are you sitting on?"
"On a pear drum."
The children wondered at the girl's most cheerful voice, for she looked cold and uncomfortable.
"What is a pear drum?"
"I'm surprised you don't know. Most anyone in good society has one."
And then she pulled it out and displayed it for them. The curious instrument was vaguely guitar-shaped, with 3 strings and 2 pegs by which to tune them. The 3rd string was never tuned at all, and thus added to the singular effect produced by the village girl's music. And yet, oddly, the pear drum was not played by touching its strings, but by turning a little handle cunningly hidden on one side. But the strange thing about the pear drum was not the music it made, or the strings, or the handle, but a little square box attached to one side. The box had a little flat lid that appeared to be opened by a spring. That was all the children could make out at first. They were most anxious to see inside the box, or to know what it contained, but they thought it might look curious to say so. The girl looked at her instrument with affection.
"It really is a most beautiful thing, a pear drum. It cost a great deal of money. I am very rich."
And this, the children thought, a really remarkable statement, for they had not supposed that rich people dressed in old clothes or went about without bonnets. She might at least have done her hair, they thought.
"You don't look rich,"
Turkey blurted in as polite a voice as possible.
"Perhaps not."
"You look rather shabby."
"Indeed? Well, a little shabbiness is very respectable. Just ask the others."
She picked up the little box by the side of the pear drum, and the children wondered what she meant. Opening it, she spoke inside, as if there was someone who could hear her.
"They've said I look rather shabby. Can you believe it? They don't believe I'm rich."
You're not speaking to anyone.
"Oh, yes, I am. I'm speaking to them both."
She looked down at the box in her hands.
"I have in here a little man and a little woman to match. He's dressed as a peasant and she's in a red petticoat with a white handkerchief pinned across her chest. When I play, they dance most beautifully."
"Oh, let us see!"
Let us see.
The children cried with desperate curiosity. The village girl looked back at them with doubt in her eyes, finally saying,
"I'm afraid that I'm not sure if I can."
Why not?
"Well, tell me, are you good children?"
Yes,
Oh,
yes, we are very good.
Very good.
She closed the lid of the box as the children stared with astonishment.
"That was my worry. I'm afraid it's quite impossible."
But
we are
They
good.
cried again, thinking she had misheard.
We are really very good, we promise. Mother always says so.
"Yes, I heard you before."
Then can't you let us see the dancing man and woman?
"Oh dear, no. They can only be seen by naughty children."
Naughty children?
Oh, yes. And the worse the children are, the better the dancing becomes. I really hoped to share it with you. I really did. If only you weren't so good.
It was as if she was accusing them of some terrible crime. She put the pear drum carefully under her ragged cloak and prepared to go on her way.
It requires a great deal of skill, being naughty. Well then, good day.
And swiftly, she walked away.
Will we find you in the village tomorrow?
The girl continued on her way, while the children felt their eyes fill with tears and their hearts ache with disappointment. When their mother saw them, she was greatly astonished, and, fearing they were hurt, ran to meet them.
Oh, my dear children, what is the matter?
But they did not dare tell their mother about the village girl. They promised that was wrong.
But then why are you crying? Poor children, you must be tired and hungry. After tea, you'll feel much, much better.
And she went back to the cottage, opening the window to let in the sweet, fresh air, and put the kettle on to boil. After placing the bread and tea things on the table, she called her daughters in a loving voice.
Dear children, come and have your tea.
But the children made no answer to their dear mother. They only stood still by the window and said nothing. Then Blue Eyes and Turkey turned round, and when they saw the tall loaf baked crisp and brown, and the cups all in a row, and the jug of milk all waiting for them, they went to the table and sat down and felt a little happier. And the mother bounced the baby on her knee and sang little songs and laughed, and they thought of the father far away at sea, and wondered what he would say to them all when he came home again. Then she looked up and saw that Turkey's eyes were full of tears.
My dear little Turkey, what is the matter? Come to mother, my sweet. Come to your mother.
Putting down the baby, she held out her arms, and Turkey, getting up from her chair, ran swiftly into them, sobbing.
Oh, Mother. Oh, dear Mother, I do so want to be naughty.
And then Blue Eyes left her chair also, and, rubbing her face against her mother's shoulder, cried sadly.
And so do I, Mother. Oh, I'd give anything to be very, very naughty.
But my dear children, why do you want to be naughty? I should be very angry if you were naughty. But you could never be, for it would make me so unhappy.
Why couldn't we?
The mother thought a while before she answered, and when she did so, they hardly understood, perhaps because she seemed to be speaking rather to herself than to them.
Because if one truly loves, then that love is stronger than all the bad feelings and conquers them. If the love is real, unkindness and wickedness have no power over it.
The girls didn't know what she meant, and they continued crying.
We do love you. We do.
Then wipe the tears from your eyes.
But we want to be naughty.
Then I should know you did not love me.
If we were very, very, very naughty and wouldn't be good, no matter what?
I should try to make you better.
But if you couldn't?
The mother's eyes filled with tears, a sob almost choking her.
If you wouldn't be good, no matter what, I should have to go away and leave you.
You couldn't.
Yes, I could, but it would make me so unhappy.
But we must have a mother. We're only children.
I'd send you a new mother, with glass eyes and a wooden tail. But I will never leave you as long as you love me.
We won't be naughty. We'll be good. We should hate the new mother, and she should never come here.
And they clung to their own mother and kissed her fondly. But when they went to bed, they sobbed bitterly, for they remembered the little dancing man and woman and longed more than ever to see them. But how could they bear to hurt their own mother in that way?
Good day.
Blue Eyes and Turkey approached the girl, who was once again sitting by the heap of stones. It was as if she had never moved from the day before.
The weather is really charming.
The children took no notice of her greeting.
Are the little man and woman there?
Of course. They are both here and quite well. The little man tips his hat to the lady. It is so romantic. And the little woman has heard a secret. She tells it while she dances.
The children begged to see.
Quite impossible, I assure you. You are too good.
But Mother says if we are naughty, she will go away and send home a new mother.
Indeed, that is what they all say.
What do you mean?
They all threaten that kind of thing. But I fear you could not be naughty even if you tried.
Please show us, and we will be so naughty when we return home.
Certainly not beforehand.
But if we are very naughty tonight, will you show them to us when we return?
Questions asked today are always better answered tomorrow.
The girl turned round and walked on. For a few minutes they stood still looking after her. Then they broke down and cried. Turkey was the first to wipe away her tears. Together, all the way home, they planned how to begin being naughty. And that afternoon, the dear mother was sorely distressed. For instead of sitting at their tea as usual with smiling, happy faces, they broke their mugs and threw their bread and butter on the floor. And when their mother told them to do one thing, they carefully went and did another. And as for helping to put away, they left her to do it all by herself and only stamped their feet with rage when she told them to go upstairs until they were good.
We won't be good. We hate being good.
We like being naughty very much.
Don't you remember what I told you I should do if you were very, very naughty?
There is no mother with a wooden tail and glass eyes, and if there were, we should just stick pins in her and send her away. But there is none.
Then the mother's sadness became anger at last, and she sent them off to bed. They spent the night laughing with joy, jumping in their beds and singing merry songs at the top of their voices. The next morning, without asking, the children got up and ran off as fast as they could over the fields towards the bridge to look for the village girl. She was sitting, as usual, by the heap of stones with the pear drum under her shawl. They told her the things they had done and how angry their mother had been. But the girl kept the pear drum carefully hidden.
We were very naughty. So naughty we were sent to bed.
If you were really naughty, you wouldn't have gone to bed at all. But, you see, you can't help it. It takes such skill to be naughty well.
But we broke our mugs and we dropped our bread to the floor. The kitchen was foul.
Mere trifles. Did you throw cold water on the fire? Did you break the clock? Did you pull all the tins down from the walls and throw them on the floor?
No,
exclaimed the children, aghast.
We could not do that.
I thought not. So many people mistake a little noise and foolishness for real naughtiness. Well, good day.
And before they could say another word, she had vanished. So the children went home and did all the things she said. They threw water on the fire. They pulled down the baking dish and the cake tin, the fish slice and the lid of the saucepan and banged them on the floor. They broke the clock and danced on the butter. They turned everything upside down, and then they sat still and wondered if they were naughty enough. And when the mother saw all that they had done, she did not scold them as she had before. She just broke down and cried, and then looked at the children and said sadly,
My poor Blue Eyes and Turkey, what has become of you? Unless you are good tomorrow, unless you show me that you love me, I shall indeed have to go away and come back no more. And the new mother I told you of will come to you.
They did not believe her, yet their hearts ached when they saw how unhappy she looked, and they thought within themselves that once they had seen the little man and woman dance, they would be good forever afterwards. The next morning, before the birds were stirring or the flowers had wiped their eyes ready for the day, the children crept out of the cottage and ran across the fields. They did not think the village girl would be up so very early, but their hearts had ached so much at the sight of their mother's sad face that they had not been able to sleep, and they longed to know if they had been naughty enough, and if they might just once hear the pear drum and see the little man and woman dance. To their surprise, they found the village girl sitting by the heap of stones, and they noticed that the box containing the little man and woman was open, but she closed it quickly when she saw them. They excitedly told her everything they'd done. The girl looked at them curiously, then drew the yellow silk handkerchief that she sometimes wore around her head out of her pocket, and began smoothing out the creases in it with her hands.
You seem really quite excited.
But the girl only went on smoothing out her handkerchief.
I'm so very particular about my dress.
They could hardly listen to her in their excitement.
We have been so very naughty, and Mother says she will go away today and send home a new mother if we are not good.
Indeed, there is an endless variety in language. The things people say are so singular and amusing.
The children did not understand.
But if she goes, what shall we do?
People go and people come. First they go, and then they come. Perhaps she will go before she comes. She really couldn't come before she goes. Oh, you had better go back and be good. You're really not clever enough to be anything else.
But we did all the things you told us.
You didn't throw the looking glass out of the window or stand the baby on its head.
No, we didn't do that.
I thought not. Well, good day. I shall not be here tomorrow.
Please just let us see them once.
Well, I shall go past your cottage at 11 o'clock this morning. Perhaps I shall play the pear drum as I go by.
And will you show us the man and woman?
Quite impossible, unless you really deserved it. Make-believe naughtiness is only spoiled goodness. It's a waste of time, I fear. But of course I should not like to interfere with you. 11 o'clock, I shall be quite punctual. I'm very particular about my engagements.
Then again the children went home and were naughty. Oh, so very, very naughty that the dear mother's heart ached and her eyes filled with tears, and at last she went upstairs and slowly put on her best gown and her new sunbonnet. And she dressed the baby all in its Sunday clothes, and then she came down and stood before Blue Eyes and Turkey. And just as she did so, Turkey threw the looking glass out of the window, and it fell with a loud crash upon the ground.
Goodbye, my children. Goodbye, my Blue Eyes. Goodbye, my Turkey. Oh, my poor children.
Weeping bitterly, the mother kissed the children and took the baby into her arms.
The new mother will be here presently.
It seemed as if the children were spellbound, and they could not follow her. They opened the window wide and called after her, but the mother only looked round and shook her head, and they could see the tears falling down her cheeks. They cried and cried, but still the mother went across the fields. Just before she could no longer be seen, she stopped and turned and waved her handkerchief, all wet with tears, to the children at the window. She made the baby kiss its hand, and in a moment, mother and baby had vanished from their sight. Then the children felt their hearts ache with sorrow, and they cried bitterly just as their mother had done, and they could not believe that she had gone. Surely she would come back, they thought. She would not leave them altogether, but oh, if she did. And then the broken clock struck 11, and they looked at each other, while their hearts stood still, and they rushed to the open window. They saw the village girl coming towards them from the fields, dancing along and playing the pear drum as she did so. Behind her, walking slowly, was the man with the dogs whom they had seen on the first day they met the girl. He was playing a flute with a strange, shrill sound, and after the man followed the two dogs, slowly waltzing round and round on their hind leg.
We have done all you told us,
Blue Eyes called when she had recovered from the astonishment.
Come and see.
The girl did not cease her playing or her dancing, but called out above the music,
You did it all badly. You threw the water on the wrong side of the fire. The tin things were not quite in the middle of the room. The clock was not broken enough. You did not stand the baby on its head.
But our mother has gone away. Show us the little man and woman now and let us hear the secret.
The girl was just in front of the cottage, but she did not stop playing. The sound of the strings seemed to go through their hearts. She did not stop dancing. She was already passing by the cottage. And still the man followed her, playing shrilly on his flute, and still the two dogs waltzed round and round after him. On they went, all of them, together. The children ran from the house, begging the girl to stop and show them the dancing couple. She turned around, still dancing to the music, and held the box out before them.
The little man and the woman have gone away. See, their box is empty.
And then, for the first time, the children saw that the lid of the box was raised and hanging back, and that no little man and woman were in it.
But our mother is gone. Will she ever come back?
The girl turned and continued on towards the long road leading out of the city.
No, she'll never come back. I saw her by the bridge. She took a boat up on the river. She is sailing to the sea. She will meet your father once again, and they will go sailing to countries far away.
The children cried out but could say no more, for their hearts seemed to be breaking. Then the girl, her voice getting fainter and fainter in the distance, called out once more to them before vanishing altogether.
Your new mother is coming. She is already on her way.
The children looked at each other, and the little cottage home, that only a week before had been so bright and happy, so cozy and so spotless. The fire was out, and the tins and dishes and bits of bread were all lying on the floor. And there was the broken clock, no time on its face. There was the cupboard on the wall, no sweet surprise on its shelf, and the baby's high chair, but no little baby to sit in it. In the midst of it all stood the children, looking at the wreck they had made.
I wish we had never seen the village girl at all.
Surely Mother will come back. She knows we shall die if she doesn't come back.
I don't know what we shall do if the new mother comes. I shall never, never like any other mother.
We won't let her in. We will bolt the door and shut the window, and we won't take any notice when she knocks.
So they bolted the door and shut the window, and all through the afternoon they sat watching and listening for fear of the new mother. But they saw and heard nothing of her, and gradually they became less and less afraid lest she should come. When it was dinner time, they were very hungry, but they could only find some stale bread. Then they thought that perhaps when it was dark, their own dear mother would come home, and she would forgive them. And then Blue Eyes thought that when their mother returned, she would be very cold, so they crept out the back door to gather wood, and at last they made a fire. With the fire burning bright, they began to be happy again, and to feel certain that their own mother would return. And the sight of the pleasant fire reminded them of all the times she had waited for them to come home from the post office, and of how she had welcomed them and comforted them, and given them nice warm tea and sweet bread and talked to them. Oh, how sorry they were they had been naughty, and all for that nasty village girl. They did not care a bit about the little man and woman now, or want to hear the secret. They fetched a pail of water and washed the floor. They scrubbed the tins till they looked bright again, and, putting a footstool on a chair, carefully hung the things in their places. And then they picked up the broken mugs and made the room as neat as they could. They took down the tea tray and got out the cups and put the kettle on the fire to boil, and made everything look as home-like as they could, till it looked as if their dear mother's hands had been busy about it. At last all was ready, and Blue Eyes and Turkey washed their faces and their hands, and then sat and waited. The children had fallen asleep, and the fire was dim and low when a loud knocking at the door woke them at the table. Their hearts stood still as the terrible knocking rang again. They knew it could not be their own mother, for she would have turned the handle and tried to come in without knocking at all.
The new mother is here. What shall we do? We won't let her in.
And again came a loud and horrible knocking at the door.
We won't go away!
The awful hammering continued. Blue Eyes, in fear and trembling, put her back against the door as Turkey went to the window, peeping out. She could just see a black satin bonnet with a frill around the edge and a long, bony arm carrying a black leather bag. For a second, she swore she saw the flashing of 2 glass eyes.
What shall we do?
The door shook and rattled with the terrible knocking. Afraid it would break, Turkey joined with her back against the door, and the rattling stopped. For a long, terrible moment, all was still. Perhaps the new mother had made up her mind to go away. And then, with a fearful blow, the little painted door was cracked and splintered. With a shriek, the children darted from the spot and fled out the back door into the forest beyond. All night long they stayed in the darkness and the cold, and all the next day, and when the darkness had fallen and the night was still once again, hand in hand, Blue Eyes and Turkey crept back to the home where they were once so happy, and, with beating hearts, they looked through the window. The mother was at the stove. Her long, heavy wooden tail thumped into the cabinets as she turned, blinding the children with the glare of her cracked glass eyes.
Mad Henry was a hermit who lived alone in a decrepit mansion at the edge of town. Rumors were rife about the wild-eyed man. Some folks said that he was a magician who called upon the powers of darkness to wreak havoc upon his neighbors. Others called him a mad doctor who could restore life to foul corpses from the local cemetery. No respectable citizen in town had anything to do with Mad Henry. Then one year, a new family moved to town with a lovely daughter, Rachel, who caught Mad Henry's eye. He showered the maiden with gifts. goblets of pure gold, necklaces of pearl, and a pot of daisies that never dropped a single petal. Despite the gifts, Rachel fell in love with another, Jeffrey, a handsome young man just home from university. A week after meeting, they eloped, leaving behind a stunned Mad Henry. When the couple returned from their elopement, they threw a big ball and invited everyone in town. While Rachel was waltzing with her father, she heard a clap of thunder. Lightning flashed again and again. Suddenly, the double doors flew open and a breeze whirled in, bringing with it the smell of dead, decaying things. Mad Henry loomed in the doorway, pupils gleaming red with anger. He was followed by the grotesque figures of the dead, who came marching 2 by 2 into the room. Their eye sockets glowed with blue fire as they surrounded the room. 2 of the corpses captured Jeffrey and threw him down at the feet of their lord. Red eyes gleaming, Mad Henry drew a silver-bladed knife and casually cut the bridegroom's throat from ear to ear. Rachel screamed and ran forward, pushing through the foul, stinking corpses of the dead, and flung herself upon her dying husband. "Kill us both!" she cried desperately. But Mad Henry plucked her out of the pool of blood surrounding her dead husband and carried her out into the thundering night. Behind him, the army of the dead turned from the grisly scene and followed their master. The sounds of thunder and lightning faded away as the alchemist and his dead companions disappeared into the dark night. The bride and groom's fathers gathered a small mob and followed the evil hermit, intent upon saving Rachel. When they searched Mad Henry's house, they found it completely empty, save for a light, which shone from a series of mysterious globes that bobbed near the ceiling of each room. Mad Henry had vanished, taking Rachel along with him. Jeffrey was buried in the local cemetery, and the dance hall was torn down. Search parties scoured the countryside for days, but turned up nothing. No one in town spoke about what had happened, and no one dared imagine what had become of poor Rachel. After a year had passed, a timid knock sounded upon the door of Rachel's parents' home. When her father opened it, he saw a gaunt, gray figure on the stoop. His beautiful daughter, Rachel, previously full of life, now dull with exhaustion and pain. With her tongue removed, she couldn't speak, but she produced a knife from her tattered garments. A knife they'd seen before in the hands of Mad Henry himself. The gleam of satisfaction in Rachel's eyes told them that the streaks of blood that coated the knife were those of her captor, and the parents welcomed their daughter back home. They sat her in their most comfortable chair before fetching blankets and bread and warm tea. But when they returned, Rachel was dead, sitting upright, with a peaceful smile upon her ravaged face.